back now. Jide Ogunsanwo joins us now. He's our data and information analyst. Thank you for coming on again today, Jide. Well, we've been talking about election sequence, and there are those who they've spoken about the legality. But let's go through how it used to be. What did you see in terms of the order of those elections when you look through?
So there are several ways to look at it. One way is to look at what had happened 9 decades ago in Liberia. But we'll get back to that. Let's look at the 3 problems Nigerians are talking about. And that is, the first is, what will happen if the National Assembly elections hold before the presidential elections? The second question is, what will happen, or what had happened when the presidential election happened before the National Assembly elections? Now, the third question is, what is really behind the request to change these elections? And we'll talk about all these 3 things this morning. But let's start with the first. Let's look at the calendar of all 7 presidential elections we've had. Now, if we look at that calendar, we'll find out that 4 times we've seen the National Assembly elections happen before the presidential elections. 1979, 1999, 2003, and 2011. 4 times elections have held, National Assembly elections before the presidential. Once, only once, has the presidential election happened before the National Assembly elections, and that was in 1983. And twice, 2007 and 2015, we've had the National Assembly elections and the presidential elections happen together. But what is more important is for us to understand the implications of this. And to understand the implications of this, let's look at 2 elections. The Senate election in 1979, which was the first election that we had where it was the National Assembly election first, before the presidential election. And then let's compare that to the 1983 election, where it was the presidential election first, before the Senate election. Now, what you find out for the National Assembly is that in 1979, when the National Assembly election first happened, the Senate won only 36. That's the National Party of Nigeria, NPN. They won 36 out of 95 seats. Now, that's approximately 38%.
Okay, 38%
of the seats. That was when the National Assembly elections happened before the presidential. But in 1983, when the presidential elections happened first, the Senate, the winning party, even had more seats at the Senate. So they had...
Okay, so this 38% and 64% are for the ruling party.
For the ruling party. And so we see from that evidence that in 1983, when the presidential election happened first, the ruling party won more seats. So it does seem that the presidential election happening first favors
the ruling
party and favors the Senate. And so it is a myth if we think that the change of elections is really about the Senate, especially if you look at even the presidential election. That is Shagari versus Shagari. 1979, when the National Assembly election happened first, and 1983, when the presidential election happened first. Again, what happened for Shagari in 1983 was a better year when the presidential elections happened first, because his margin of victory in 1979, he got only 33% of the 17 million votes that were cast. But in 1983, he got 47% of the votes. And so here's the conclusion. For the winning party and for the Senate and for the president, the evidence does show that if we compare what happened when the National Assembly elections happened first and when the presidential elections happened first, it does favor both the Senate, the president, and the ruling party.
So, ditto 2007 and 15?
Now, that's where it gets more interesting. But before we go to 2007 and 2015, it's first of all to establish that presidential elections happening first, based on history, favors the Senate and favors the president. That is the fact. It isn't a myth. presidential elections happening first favors both the president and the Senate.
So it's not going to favor, if this goes through, it's not going to favor the presidency and the National Assembly in 2019.
But that will be quickly too.
Well, there's no start for that yet.
but it does even go much more interesting, because people have said this isn't really about 79 or 83. 3 weeks ago, I had talked about Buhari being the king of the North. Never has he lost an election in the North. 4 elections. So this is really based on the evidence between the king of the North and the grand master of having National Assembly elections first. Now, if you look at that calendar carefully, the calendar that shows the 4 elections that have happened with the National Assembly elections happening first. 1979, who was behind that election? It was President Obasanjo. The next election, 1999, 2003, who was the key figure there? It was President Obasanjo. Who was the key figure behind President Goodluck in 2011? It was President Obasanjo.
Even 2003, too.
Exactly. So 79, 03, 79, 99, 03, 011, the 4 elections that we've seen, that the National Assembly elections happened first, the key actor was President Obasanjo. President Obasanjo understands the permutations and combinations of how to deliver results when the National Assembly elections happen first. So do you really think it's a coincidence that these discussions on having the National Assembly elections first is happening within the same period when we have President Obasanjo's letter? No, it isn't. It is really a war between the king of the North and the grand master of having National Assembly elections first. Now, there's even further evidence to tell us exactly what is going on. Now, let's look at the last election candidate Buhari lost, and that was in 2011. In 2011, what happened for him to have lost? The National Assembly elections happened first. Now, here is a secret that the National Assembly guys know that they do not want President Buhari to know. And that is, for you...
We'll let him know when we come back from this break. Join us again. Well, Jide is going to tell us what's going on, but tell us a bit about what it is that they don't want the president to know.
Now, they've studied how the president lost in 2011. And that happened by the National Assembly elections happening first. Now, here's what the National Assembly knows. You cannot win and you cannot be president of Nigeria if you do not win the National Assembly. And so in 2011, even though President Buhari won the North, 12.2 million votes, Chamberlain, he only had 6 senators from the CPC. Now, the most prolific striker of his senators was from Kaduna called Mohammed Saleh. Now, not the Mohammed Saleh of Liverpool, but there was a prolific striker then for him.
That one is on course.
That was winning the votes in Kaduna. But again, the 6 senators were only centered in 3 states, Kaduna, Katsina, and Nasarawa. And so, for you to be president of Nigeria, you need to have the majority in the National Assembly. That is the secret. But let's also look at things that are confusing a lot of Nigerians. When people ask, what exactly is going on with our elections? In 1983, when we had, for the first time and the only time, the presidential election coming first, there were 82 million Nigerians. 82 million. And we had 25 million votes. Now, carefully listen to this. Between 1983 to the last election, we are now 187 million. But look at the total number of votes. Only 29.
Just 3 million difference.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the population has grown by over 100 million Gimba. It doesn't make sense. The only 3 things this means is either we do not know how to count ourselves, or we do not know how to count our votes, or perhaps we don't know how to do both. But it doesn't make sense. Moreover, today, there are concerns about what will happen in 2019. Are we really going to stay divided, or are we going to be united? Now, let me share 3 secrets with you. Today, we are divided by politics, we are divided by religion, and we are divided by money. What do I mean by we are divided by politics? Oh, yes, we are divided by politics. The Senate has 63 members. that are in the APC. So the APC controls the ruling majority in the Senate. But the reason why we are divided by politics is half of these members were in the PDP. I say we are divided by religion. Oh, yes. Because even though President Buhari won the majority of the votes in 2015, 80% of his votes came from the Muslim majority north. He only got 20% from the Christian majority south. We are divided by money. Because last year, 1.7 trillion naira was given to the states. In fact, but only 12 states account for majority of all this money that was collected. So indeed, we are divided by money, we are divided by religion, and we are divided by politics. And the hope is that before, not by 2019, before 2019, we'll be united by politics, religion will unite us, and there'll be more money for you and I and everybody on the streets.
That's what we anchor this morning. Jide Ogunsanwo, our data and information analyst. Thank you for coming on this morning. And we can only say the plot thickens. So they don't want to tell them who's going to win? No.
You can really say that now. Let it out of the bag.
Thank you for watching. I'm Chamberlain Usto.
Thank you for watching. I'm Gimba Umar.
Well, thank you. I'm Maukbe Ogun Yusuf.
Amen to hope, Babajide. Thank you for watching. I'm Ajuri Ngalale.